This episode of the Adventure Game Engine Interest series was brought to you in part by our Portal Maker patrons, Leona and Griffith Locke. We couldn't do this show without folks like you, so thank you.
Correctly with the correct amount.
D20 Radio, where gamers roll.
www.d20radio.com.
Welcome to the AGEIS, Acolyte. We have so many portals, so many wondrous things to show you. But today, I think this one will be perfect. Hello everyone, thank you for joining us at the Adventure Game Engine Interest Series, the show for all ages, but not really, we are gonna swear. My name is Reyn, and I am not alone in this empty blank void we call podcast land, but feel free to assume that there is a very cool ghost who will be joining me later. We'll be meeting them here in a bit, but first I want to tell you about all kinds of cool stuff as we get started here at the Adventure Game Engine Interest Series. My instruments are all working. Fantastic, full power ahead then. As you all know, we are proud members of the D20 Radio Network. You probably heard their zinger at the top. A collective of podcasters who revel in gaming, geekery, and other goo-gaw. That's a word, right? I think it is. This episode, we are making a shout-out to the Miskatonic Univeristy Podcast, your podcast destination for all things horror gaming. While they are traditionally your home of Call of Cthulhu gaming, they cover so much more. Their latest episode is episode 239. It's called Range, Bridget, with London Carlisle. Keeper Bridget continues to make this the giggliest podcast I have ever listened to, as her and Keeper Murph sit down with actor, game master, and apparently samurai movie geek, London Carlisle. They chat with London about his career, his horror gaming adventures, and talk a whole lot more about why Murph and Bridget want to be his new best friends. You can find links to their show and more through our show notes and in the description of this episode. Go give them a friendly Go Pods from us. And a segment that I'm very excited that we get to do again, we're going to take a quick peek through a new portal here at the top of the episode, our fan creation spotlight. Although, I guess today it's a bit more official than it usually is, because we usually just cover folks' homebrew content, but today we're covering published content on the Adventure Game, the Age Creators Alliance. We're going to be peeking through a new portal to Changing Seasons by Christopher Robin Negeline. I apologize if I got your name wrong. Please correct me. Changing Seasons is a quick and dirty horror adventure. At only 8 pages, the spooky adventure will give you and your group an evening of monsters and ghosts with suggestions for how to continue the adventure. The adventure includes 3 new monsters, but telling you about them would spoil the surprise. You can find this adventure on DriveThruRPG. Just search for the Age Creators Alliance, and you can find it and other adventures for your gaming table. Alright, well, you folks have probably heard me ramble on enough by myself. But I do have a very, very special guest on with us today. I believe it is his first visit to the Adventure Game Engine Interest Series on a microphone. I've only spoken to him at cons, but please give a warm welcome to Chris Pramas from Green Ronin. Chris, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. How are you?
So far, so good. I wish it was less dark out so fast.
Yeah, indeed.
Well, we think we're having a good time. And I get to talk about the Adventure Game Engine, which is always a good time for me, personally.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, I have a fondness for it, so...
I would certainly hope so.
Yeah.
We're going to be maybe taking a quick trip into the Wayback Machine with this particular episode. For those of you who are following along with us, you know that this week, the week of us recording this episode, is the week of Dragon Age Day, which is December 4th. It's December 4th every year. This year, it is also December 4th. But we are going to be taking part in Dragon Age Day with a couple of streams, and in preparation for that, I thought it would be an excellent idea to take some time to talk about the Dragon Age role-playing game in a bit more of a sort of quote-unquote holistic view. Talk about where it's been, where it is now, where it could be going, and all the fun we've had along the way. And I was very, very pleasantly surprised that Chris Pramas took some time out of his busy schedule to come talk about it. So thank you so much again for coming on.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Thank you. Let's see. We also did an episode about the Dragon Age RPG in a bit more like nitty-gritty detail. It was our second episode of the discussion series. We did it with YouTuber Gilder Thalin back in episode 2, but that was 2 years ago, and I would like to think that plenty has changed since then. It was way back in the decade of 2019, so, a lot has happened since then.
It's been a decade. Yeah.
Right. This year has been a very long decade.
Yeah.
So I guess I'll start with probably the most obvious and the widest and maybe the least helpful question, but what is the Dragon Age RPG?
Well, the Dragon Age tabletop RPG is a more traditional role-playing game that is based on the Dragon Age series of video games and, the comics, books, etc. that have sprung from that. So if you've played any of the Dragon Age games, it's a world you know. So you just need to jump in and learn the system, which is meant to be easy to learn, and then get into it.
Which a lot of us have, and I'm always, especially when going through like Dragon Age fan circles, it's always wild to me personally, who may be a little biased, that I always find folks who are like, "There's a tabletop RPG for this?"
Yeah, that happens at every convention.
It's true, right? Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, new people are getting into role playing all the time, so it's not like a huge surprise. But,
right.
Yeah,
that is fair.
Yeah,
and
this is some happy faces.
This is an excellent RPG, at least in my experience, to sort of get into the tabletop role-playing space, which is excellent because a lot of the folks who I meet have played the computer games for maybe 1,000 hours, but they've never tried a tabletop game, and I very much appreciate that Dragon Age is very beginner-friendly.
Yeah, well, that was the whole idea, right? I wanted to design a game that could take computer gamers and introduce them to the fun of tabletop. So, like a big part of the struggle in doing that for any RPG is getting people to like buy in on the premise and learn about the setting and, things like that. And some people, they just sort of check out at that point where they're like, what do I have to read and learn before I can play this game? And so what's nice about Dragon Age is that, it's a world that people could come to the table knowing a lot about. And then the system was designed to kind of onboard them to tabletop, pretty quickly so they could be playing soon.
Yes, very much appreciated. Let's see.
Yeah, that's why we initially were doing these as box sets. And so Dragon Age Set 1, which was the first thing to come out, it was designed to be something that looked like a game, but also wasn't too intimidating. So it was a box set, and it had 2 books in it, slim ones. They were like 64 pages, and some dice and a map, and then you're good to start adventuring.
I still have that map hanging up on my wall, and I still have those boxes. I really liked those boxes. I thought that was a very clever idea.
Yeah.
It felt very,
It
classically
would better
D&D.
if we could have got... I'm sorry, what?
It felt very like a classical Dungeons and Dragons, like when they came back in the red boxes.
Yeah, that was the callback. And, the only problem with them was we just ended up having an uneven release schedule with them. There were all kinds of delays on Set 2, and so people who got Set 1 and sort of played through what was available were then like, well, now what do I do? And so it took us really longer than it should have to get set 2 out. And then by the time we were going to do set 3, we were already planning to do a book that combined all the 3 sets into one book. And
Yes.
so we only did a limited run of those, essentially for people who just wanted their complete sets. And then we published what is now the core rulebook.
It is a very lovely book. And I was very excited to get all 3 sets, personally.
Excellent.
Let's see. So we've got the core rulebook has everything Dragon Age in it. Well, not everything Dragon Age. There was a book that came out later. But it is. But that core rulebook is sort of the complete package if you want to play Dragon Age.
Yeah, that's right. The only thing it's I think missing is the adventure from the first box set, because that had been played by so many people already.
Mm-hmm.
And we offer it as a PDF, so you can get it if you want it.
Yeah, you can download that for free. That one's called The Dalish Curse. And
Correct.
we played that one. We had a lot of fun.
Cool.
We took all of the
I think it was Steve Kenson who designed that.
Oh, nice. Maybe
Steve is a rock.
We'll get him in here one of these days, maybe. But yes,
Yeah.
The Dalish Curse is free on the Green Ronin online store, correct?
Yes.
Excellent. Let's see. I guess my next question would be, we have now got, what is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 question mark lines of age games. So when folks are looking at all of these age games, what sets Dragon Age apart from something like Blue Rose or Modern Age?
The thing to understand about the age system is that it was created originally for Dragon Age. So that is the first iteration of the system. And so then we've been building on it since then. So when we do new age games, we try to customize them for the themes and the feel. So Blue Rose, it leans heavily into stuff like character bonds, and there's psychic rules, which are not in any of the other games. Well, I think I've modified in Modern Age, but anyway, it's one of the unique features of that fantasy setting. And then with Modern Age, Malcolm Shepard, who is the lead designer / developer, he had kind of a big task in trying to adapt the age system to cover basically anything from the start of the Industrial Revolution through into the near future, which is, quite large. And he introduced something called modes in that, which to give people essentially maximum flexibility. So, you could choose between like a gritty mode, which is like, it's pretty easy to die, so be careful who you pick a fight with. And then more pulpy, where it's like, you're pretty heroic. You can take some hits, but you're not immune to things. And then there's just sort of not exactly super heroic, but the like you're just big damn heroes mode, which lets you do more cinematic type of stuff.
The fly the car into the helicopter style of Modern Age.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's see. So Dragon Age, the role-playing game, is more, I guess, fine-tuned for the experience of being in Thedas than other games.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, it was the starting point, because basically, like, BioWare came to us when they were working on it. So this is, before Origins had even come out. They approached us and said, well, hey, look, we're doing this game that's, we're positioning as the spiritual successor to Baldur's Gate. And because of that sort of tie to tabletop RPGs, we thought it'd be really cool to have a tabletop RPG that ties into our video game. Are you interested? And so, of course, I was. Because it's BioWare. I, played a lot of Baldur's Gate back in the day. So, so when I started to design the game, like, I hadn't played it. I had to work off of design documents that they provided me. And, I went up to Edmonton to meet with the team and, learn more about the setting and the game and what they were doing with it, and then try to interpret that into a tabletop game that wasn't going to be as complicated as a computer game for obvious reasons. So that's how it got started.
Gotcha. That was all the way back in, 2009?
I think the process started in 2008, I want to say. It might have been 2009. It's been a while. But
Been a hot minute.
Yeah.
Goodness, what else have I got here? I've got like dozens of questions, and I could keep you here all night, but I'll keep it to the important ones, perhaps. Let's see. Dragon Age. One of the benefits of Dragon Age is that it's got that world, it's got books, and it's got video games, and it's got novels. Let's see. It's got a large community to speak with, to share your ideas. So finding players to join your games or finding folks to bounce your ideas off of is not hard at all. There's lots of art and music that you can find. So you've got a lot of assets that you can borrow directly from the games. You can hold up a screenshot of an ogre and say, this is the thing that you're fighting today. And it is a setting that, through my layman's knowledge, they built Thedas to be explored. There's a lot of empty space that they left for themselves for writing games, but that definitely does not mean that we can't necessarily fill a little bit of that space. And goodness,
yeah, that's great.
Goodness, I know a lot of folks who have definitely filled it with some wild stuff.
Well, when I started, I had their main world design document. And, there were enormous sections of Thedas that were just like, here's a paragraph about it. And that was it at the time. And so, we ended up creating some material because we had to, to kind of flesh things out. Some of which they later redid in their own style. And that's was one of the things about working on licensed stuff. But a lot of stuff they filled in subsequent games. It just wasn't there when we started. So
gotcha. So very, very hefty question. What are some of the challenges of making an RPG that is based on an IP that you do not own? Well,
a lot of it depends on your relationship with the licensor. And so, we've done everything from we make a deal with an individual, creator or team, like we did with World of Lazarus book, where we were working with Greg Rucka and God, I'm blanking on the name of his artist co-creator, Michael Lark. We just licensed the comics directly from them, and Greg's a good, approachable guy, answers email quickly, really, is keen to do the project. On the other end, we did DC Adventures, which was a DC Comics version of our Mutants and Masterminds role-playing game. And, the first 2 years of that were great because we were working with DC's own licensing department who understood licensing, knew how to do approvals, all that kind of stuff. And then that group got disbanded and they moved all the licensing stuff out to Burbank. And so for the last 2 books that we did, we were dealing with basically a corporate sort of functionary who didn't really know a lot about DC Comics or role-playing games. And that was extremely challenging. So
I can only imagine. Goodness.
Yeah. Yeah. Because ideally you want someone who's going to be at least somewhat involved, right?
Right.
And some people have gone above and beyond, when we did Thieves Worlds, when was that? 2005, something like that. Lynn Abbey, she was around in the early days of role-playing games, played them back in the 70s, so she knew what the score was. And when we were trying to turn the magic system of the novels into one that would work for the RPG, she was totally willing to sit down with Rob Schwab, the lead designer, and just hash it out, you know. And not everyone is going to be that way, but it
Right.
really helps when they're enthused about the project and willing to give you timely feedback and that sort of stuff. Sometimes it's just like they've got a ton of stuff to do. I mean, when we had the Game of Thrones license, for the first several years, it was George doing the approvals himself.
Ooh.
And so, particularly once the HBO show started, you can imagine on George R. R. Martin's to-do list where approved role-playing game stuff went. It was
Yeah.
far down the priority list. So.
Oof. And I imagine that 2009 BioWare is quite different from like 2019 BioWare.
Yeah, I mean, over the years, one by one, the people we dealt with the most have largely left the company. So it is different for sure. But I mean, they were good to work with. If they could at least give us an idea, if they couldn't, if they hadn't figured something out yet, they could at least give us some guidelines. And they were good about doing approvals and giving us, intellectual property feedback and that kind of stuff. So
very good. They seem like folks who got a lot of ideas.
Yeah. Well, a lot of the Dragon Age team, they had backgrounds in tabletop role-playing games and LARPing and stuff. So to them, this was just like a cool extension of what they were doing. Sometimes RPGs, as far as licensees go, are treated like, oh yeah, what's that little stuff that you do? And okay. But, the BioWare folks were actually keen about it. So that was nice.
Mm-hmm. I can only imagine that having licensees who know about tabletop games was extra helpful.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, we had one licensor who shall remain nameless, but we want to do a map of the setting, and he told us that we could do a map, but it would be wrong.
Man.
And I was like, right, so here's the part where you could tell us how to make it right, and so it's not all wine and roses, is what I'm saying.
Sure, yeah. I can only imagine. It probably only got more complicated as Dragon Age went from being like a hot new game from BioWare to like the industry quietly holds its breath waiting for Dragon Age 4.
Yeah. Well, and BioWare as a whole with their growth and the success of Mass Effect as well, and really just like setting such a standard for what computer role playing games can be. Like I remember when Skyrim came out, my wife Nicole and my stepdaughter Kate were taking turns playing it, and so I was watching them. And compared to Dragon Age, the story was just such a nothing. I was like, yeah, this does not hold my attention at all. Yeah, go BioWare. But the downside of that is they put such an enormous amount of effort into writing and story crafts. Like the fact that in Origins, you can play that whole game and different combinations of NPCs behind you will have conversations that never repeat. Like that's just a jaw-dropping amount of content that they had to write.
So very many novels went into those little dialogue bars, and it's very astounding.
Yeah.
I don't know how helpful this question is, but I was a little curious. Maybe like from maybe like an industry or maybe from a personal standing. What are some of the benefits of a licensed role-playing game?
Well, I mean, the first benefit is just name recognition. Particularly helpful. By the time we did the core rulebook, like Dragon Age was really established. But like if you can tie something to a new hot thing, that's obviously good for you. We were lucky enough with Game of Thrones to get a license before the HBO deal. We just got to benefit from the HBO deal by getting it onto people's understanding. Like, oh, this is a cool fantasy IP.
Mm-hmm.
Another asset that people don't think about, but is really important is art assets. So depending on what you're licensing, there's art attached to it that you can use potentially. And so although you're paying a licensing fee, the fact that, all or much of the art is stuff you can use via the license is a huge money saver. So, again, we did DC Adventures, like we had almost 75 years of DC art that we could potentially call upon. So, I mean, that was pretty great. But same for BioWare. They had a lot of art as well that we could use from various art books and concept art and stuff like that.
That core rulebook turned out to be a very pretty book.
Yeah, for sure.
Did I remember correctly that one won an ENnie for art?
That sounds right.
That was a while ago, so it's a little fuzzy.
Yeah. Yeah. I admit my memory is not the best for what exactly won what in what award. So
right. We podcasted about it, but dang, and that's so much podcast to go back through.
Yeah, but yes, it was a super pretty book, and it was helpful that they had done like a big lore book through
that Dark Horse
comic company, Dark Horse, that we could draw on.
Hey, no kidding.
As well, yeah, and we did our own art too, but
of course,
yeah. There's also a funny limitation though, like when we were doing Origins, they had all those spirits in the Fade, right? And there was God, my fucking brain. There's what happens to a mage, right? When they get possessed by something from the Fade, they turn into a specific monster who I'm not remembering. But
an abomination, I think.
Yeah, an abomination. Jesus Christ. Anyway, like in my conception, an abomination could look like almost anything because, it was the individual expression of that mage, as they got twisted. And when we tried to do that, the art director at BioWare was like, oh no, abominations look like this, and it's exactly what the computer game version looked like. And it was like, okay, like I understand you have to have one because you don't want to model like umpteen different things in a computer game, but like we have artists, like we could make like cool variations on the theme, but
we could do a couple of those.
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. Hadn't thought about that. But yeah, I suppose when they've got the model, like this is what they look like, then want to have a bit of consistency, I suppose.
I mean, it's funny because like Games Workshop is kind of the same way with their demon miniatures because they need them to have a consistent look so they can make a line of miniatures that look cohesive together. But like the whole idea of demons is that, they're from the realm of chaos, and like you would think in the realm of chaos, stuff could look like whatever.
Imagine that.
There was more of that in the older game, but things really got codified later.
All right. So super basics here. How and a lot of the folks who, of course, been listening along with the podcast, we've been doing this for a hot second, will probably know the answers to most of these questions, but this is going to be for the folks here who are joining us for the first time. Hello. We're talking about the Dragon Age role-playing game. For those folks here who have not tried it out yet, how does the Dragon Age role-playing game work?
So it was designed as a class and level system because that's how the video game was. I tried to make it, as I said, like approachable to people. So basically, you choose from 3 classes, mage, rogue, and warrior. Everything in the game is done with 6-sided dice. And it's easy to roll a character. In the Dragon Age game in particular, you take a background which often has a cultural component as well. It might tell you that you're from a particular region, or, we did like an Orlesian exile that was specifically someone from Orlais in Ferelden and, that kind of stuff. And that tells you more about your character, gives you some abilities, and so on. And you can be ready to go in less than a half an hour, really. And once you start playing, like everything runs off of 6-sided dice. So generally speaking, when you need to do something that isn't where there's a chance of failure, you're going to roll 3 6-sided dice. 2 of the dice are one color, and the third die is a different color. That off-color die in Dragon Age is called, unsurprisingly, the Dragon Die. It's called different things in other Age games. But anyway, that Dragon Die is used to both level your measure of success when you do something, but its most key use is what we call stunts. And stunts are really like the killer app of the adventure game engine. So it started as sort of a dynamic critical hit system where these were something that you used in combat. And if you succeeded in an attack and you got doubles on any of the dice, you then generated stunt points equal to the result of the Dragon Die. And then you had to spend them immediately on some cool stuff that you did. And you have a little table of stunts. Stunts cost a variable amount from 1 to 5, sometimes more. And you can mix and match the stunts any way you want. So if you get 4 stunt points, you could do a 3-point stunt and a 1-point stunt, or 2 twos, or whatever you want to do. So basically, you figure out what you want to do, and then if you like, you can narrate the cool stuff that you just pulled off. And in those rules, I was able to nest things like disarming and getting extra attacks and all sorts of other stuff that gets real crufty in other games. And as we were playtesting, people were like, "Yeah, this is the coolest part of the game. There should be more opportunities to do this." So originally I didn't have spell stunts because I thought, hey, if you can cast spells, that's already pretty special. But people playing the mages like they really want spell stunts. And then from there, we added role-playing stunts, exploration stunts. Later, there were chase stunts, like all kinds of stuff. It's just a way to add some fun to the table and give you some unexpected surprises, hopefully good surprises.
Ideally.
And unlike some D20 based systems where it's like, oh, on a 20 you do something special, like your odds of getting doubles on 3d6 is like 44% or something like that. So
Something like that.
they're happening often, which is nice because it's spruces the game up, as it were.
I honestly forgot that until you mentioned it, that there used to only be combat stunts in this game. We've been using, we've been having stunts all over the place for so long. It's just kind of hit me. Yeah. I mean, it's been expanded a lot over the various Age games. Modern Age, of course, added a whole bunch of new stunt types to deal with firearms and other things. Same with Blue Rose, and same with 5th season when that comes out. Hint, hint. For all those of you out there, you heard it first. You probably didn't hear it first, actually. Let's see. I've always had to keep retraining myself to not call the stunt die by a name for the Age game that I'm not currently playing. It took us probably at least a year to completely train out not saying Dragon Die when we started playing Fantasy Age. Yeah. When Fantasy Age developed in the first place was basically lots of people liked the system of Dragon Age, but they weren't interested in Thedas. And so we were looking at just spinning off the rules on their own for people who wanted to play in different worlds. And then we were extra motivated to do so when Will Wheaton called me and wanted to do the Titan's Grave web series using the adventure game engine. Fantasy Age developed slightly differently than Dragon Age. We changed some of the stats and things like that, but, largely the same. Easy to pick up if you had played Dragon Age. Then we had to rename the stunt die, and then we probably just should have stuck with one, but we've it's like the drama die and Blue Rose and other things. So
little bit of flavor.
In my fantasy campaign, we call it the Spirit Die,
Oh, there you
which I'm sure confuses the people who are reading the adventures I've written for the ACA. I tried to include a little.
I just need a little note up front.
Yeah, exactly. Let's see. Goodness. I've only got big and unhelpful questions for you. But the adventure game engine has been around for a hot second. Don't have to necessarily go through the whole history if you don't want to, but how has it kind of like changed over the years?
So it's just really been a continuous development. And sometimes, like something will develop in one game and then be put back into a different game. Like I actually can't remember if the whole system of bonds started in Dragon Age and went to Blue Rose, or if it was the other way around. But actually, I think we were developing it at the same time, and then each game got an iteration of it. I think, but
right.
anyways, so different bits and pieces have been added over time, and then whenever we're going to do a new game, we look at what of those pieces we think fit and what pieces we need to make for the style of game that we're doing to be able to reflect that in the rules, because we didn't want to take like a universalist approach. We want to kind of customize each expression of the rule system so it does what it's meant to do in the genre or in the property.
Gotcha. I definitely think that Age works best if it's got a little bit of customization.
Yeah.
At least in my experience.
Yeah, one thing I didn't mention in my general write-up was what I was saying earlier is, though you start with 3 classes, you could then pick up what's called the specialization at 4th level, and, that's the way the Dragon Age video game worked, although I think it was 6th level with them. But anyway, just a way to customize your character a little more. So you're not just a warrior, you're a berserker, and, this kind of stuff. And specializations are also a great way to customize your game for the setting that you're using, or other parameters that you set up when you're putting the game together.
Absolutely. Making talents and specializations is very fun.
Yeah.
It is a great temptation, and have to be very careful not to like go into with my little campaign book and be like, hey players, here's 30 extra specializations. My feelings will be hurt if you don't use any of them.
Well, so we've been working on the Fantasy Age core rulebook, which is basically like, it's not exactly a new edition, but it's like the next iteration of the Fantasy Age rules where, the stuff you've already got is backwards compatible. But anyway, one of the changes of that is that you get to pick a specialization at 1st level. And so like right away, you can differentiate your warrior from other warriors, right? And so on. So I think people will enjoy that.
My players at home are very excited for level 1 specializations, for sure.
Yeah.
Let's see. The 3d6s have pretty much stayed the same. Ability scores, a lot of the focuses, talents. The core has pretty much remained the same. It's very solid, and it's very easy to pick up, and once you learn one of them, then you can easily jump into any of the other ones and find the little bits of variety that come out of all the other Age games. Yeah. For folks who are just picking up Dragon Age today, do you have any recommendations for stuff that maybe like if you had a chance to like do it over, like if there was anything that you'd move around, or if there's any like books that you'd recommend folks pick up to help sort of supplement their adventures in Thedas?
Well, I guess the first thing I would say is don't be intimidated by the size of the core rulebook. There's always a tension when you're releasing RPGs of, completeness versus approachability. So, when we did Dragon Age Set 1, that was very high on the approachability factor. It looked like a game. It was a short amount of stuff to read. And by the time we did the core rulebook, we had 3 box sets of material plus new stuff. So it turned into a really big book. So on the plus side, it's super complete. But if you just look at it, like you might be like, oh my God, this is like homework, But the core of the system, like, you don't need to read 380 pages to to understand how to play. I guess my first advice would be give it a chance, because the size of the book does not indicate how complicated it is to learn. So, and the other thing is, I mean, because it's the internet age, like, there's freaking wikis for everything. So, if you've got a question about something cultural or whatever that's not in our books, like, get thee to Google and you will you will find, wikis and fan fiction and, all kinds of stuff that you could draw upon.
So much fan fiction.
Yeah, so much.
Let's see. I made a little list here. Oh, well, I guess not a little list. I was just kind of... we don't have to go through that list. It's pretty big. I'll post it here. The folks who want to check it out in our notes can still find it in our show notes. Just like a list of things that I thought that you could absolutely steal from other age games to help supplement your adventures in Thedas. And it is kind of part of the I guess, I don't not call it a philosophy, that sounds so high-minded, but my idea that looking at the adventure game engine as several lines of books that go to the same adventure, folks definitely would have a lot more fun in Thedas if you're at least, peeking in at a couple of the other age books to see what they do and see if it would work for your game.
Yeah, I mean, if you wanted to add, system for psychic powers into Thedas, just get Blue Rose, and there's a whole system in there that you could adapt if you wanted to.
A lot of the stuff in Blue Rose is surprisingly appropriate.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the computer games became kind of famous for the romance angle of it.
Mm-hmm.
People shipping characters and all that kind of stuff. And, Blue Rose is the game of romantic fantasy. So there's some good stuff in there that you could use with Dragon Age. Or like, if you're like, I don't know about like a class and level system, take a look at Modern Age, because Modern Age doesn't have classes. So if you want to build something without that, Modern Age is the one you should look at for, at least ideas on how to do it.
Absolutely. So, we've got folks here who've probably already, hopefully, picked up their core rulebook upon listening to this episode. They didn't even finish the episode. They went straight there and they bought it. Ideally. Yeah. So once they've got their core rulebook and they've got a group and they've got a GM, what kind of stuff is available to get started in your adventures in Thedas?
So there's a lot. Some of our older material is out of print, but still available as PDFs. So, there's an adventure anthology called Blood and Ferelden.
That sounds right.
Yeah. That has perfectly good adventures in it, but it's not in print right now. But if you like PDFs, that's something you can get. The current in-print stuff is the core rulebook, the Game Master's Kit, which has a whole bunch of cards with all the stunts on them, which is really useful if you're playing around the table. So you can just hand people, here's the exploration stunts, and put it right in front of them, and an adventure as well. And then there's Faces of Thedas, which is the last book that we did, which is just a whole bunch of characters from various games and sources, with their backgrounds, stats, adventure ideas, and so on. So you can use them as NPCs. If you want to go buck wild and just play them, you could do that too. So it's useful for GMs.
Very nice. Let's see. And of course, there are dozens of adventures that folks have written online. Some of those can be tricky to get to because a lot of links have been broken and a lot of them got written a while ago. We've been able to salvage a few, but they, of course, they still exist if your Google Foo is strong. Let's see.
Yes. You can get the adventure that I ran for Will Wheaton's tabletop show as a freebie off our website. It's written in a slightly unusual format where essentially it's just bullet points, because when I'm prepping material for when I'm going to run something, that's more or less what I do. So, but yes, I was on 2 episodes of the tabletop web series that Will did with Geek and Sundry, and the adventure I ran for those 2 sessions, I wrote up, and you can still get off our website. So it's called Duty Unto Death.
Yes, I did like that one. I was very excited to watch somebody make a good use of a perception smelling test. I think it is undervalued.
Yeah. Yeah, that guy was into it.
You can really make perception smelling work for you a lot more than you initially think.
Yeah. Well, I mean, originally in Dragon Age, that was basically a focus for just creatures or monsters.
Mm-hmm.
And because of him, we just put it in the general focus list.
Very good.
Yeah.
All right. The core rulebook has a couple of adventures in it at a couple of levels, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, including, okay, Brain, let's see if we can get this correct. I believe it was set 3 where we introduced the mass combat system, which I designed. And so the adventure in that one is kind of a bigger scope, and it involves some mass combats that you can use that system with if you want. I mean, you're never required to use it, but it gives you all the info. So if you want to recreate something like the big battles of Dragon Age in your game, you can do that.
Absolutely.
And that was what, three full adventures, I think, in the core rule book.
That sounds right. Got one for one that was written just for the core book, and then the ones from, I believe, sets 2 and 3.
Correct. Yeah.
I've run all of them except the new one for the core book. I might have to give that one a try sometime. Yeah.
Did you use the mass combat system?
We did, yes. We enjoyed it. I kind of enjoyed systems that let you get at least a little bit finicky with commands. Well, this one is not actually. This one's actually pretty hands-off and cinematic in terms of managing a mass combat. Which I very much appreciated. You let it stay in the background, but still, when you got those dice rolling every round, it keeps the tension going.
Yeah, I mean, I am, in addition to being a role-playing gamer, I'm also a hardcore war game and miniatures gamer from way back. So I could have essentially designed like a war game, where you're moving units around and da-da-da, but I didn't think that was a good match for Dragon Age. So the system I designed is really about teasing out the moments of crisis in a battle, and giving player characters an opportunity where you zoom in from the big battle into an encounter where the player characters have a chance to do something important, that can impact the way the whole battle goes. And then those things you play out as encounters with your characters. So I thought that was a good way of both having the big battles, but also making sure that the player characters were kind of the focus of that they had the attention of the camera, as it were. So,
absolutely. I would have to agree.
Yeah.
I guess this is a question you might not be able to answer, and if you can't, then that's, of course, perfectly fine. But are there many plans for the future of the Dragon Age role-playing game right now?
Currently, no.
Gotcha.
But we still maintain our license. So, we're allowed to keep selling things, and it's a possibility that could change in the future, and we could potentially do more, but nothing is actively happening right now.
Okay.
I was curious as anyone about what exactly Dragon Age 4 is going to look like, so...
Hey, fair enough.
We'll see.
You can join the club. We have jackets and anxiety.
Yeah.
We're all very excited, and I'm sure I'm going to be hearing about it a lot this coming weekend for Dragon Age Day.
Yeah, no doubt.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, my wife, Nicole, who's also the COO of the company, she's a bigger Dragon Age fan than I am. And so, she's played all the video games multiple times, and just a really big fan of the lore and everything. So she is going to be very excited to learn what's coming. So.
I saw her retweet something about a bear-based Dragon Age stream. I wasn't 100% sure what was going on. Is she involved in that, or is she just a big fan?
I don't think she's involved with it. I think she was just retweeting it as,
Okay.
here's an actual play of one of our games.
Fair enough. I mean, I'm still very intrigued to see how a all-bear campaign or game of Dragon Age would play out.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure it's fun.
Mm-hmm. And I'm only a little sad that it's going to be at the same time as our stream. Incidentally, we are going to be having. We've got a couple of streams that we're going to be doing for Dragon Age Day. First one is going to be December 3rd at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where I'm going to be doing a quick lecture for lots of folks who are big fans of Dragon Age, but haven't tried out any role-playing game, in tabletop role-playing games specifically. And then on December 4th at noon, going to be doing an actual play of a Dragon Age adventure that I wrote a very long time ago. I'm going to try and polish it up at least a little bit before we get there. But, I definitely take Dragon Age Day as an opportunity to let folks know, to crow to the heavens. By the way, folks, there's a tabletop role-playing game for this. When you're done playing the video games, you can just keep doing Dragon Age.
Yeah. Yeah. Whenever we would do the conventions like PAX, which, are heavily video game focused, we would get a lot of people, coming across the booth and being like, what? Dragon Age? So there's definitely people who can learn about it and learn to love it.
I really hope they do. We have a lot of fun with it. We managed to get like a 3-year, 20-level campaign going. That was...
Wow.
There was a big hiatus about in the middle of it, so it sounds a bit longer than it really was. But we had a good time.
Yeah. Well, hey, I haven't done that, so good job.
Oh, thank you. We powered through all of, almost all of the pre-written adventures, and I can tell you that me and my players had a blast doing it.
Awesome. It's always nice to hear.
Yeah. So, thank you very much for this game. It has brought us many evenings of joy.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's always, because the game's been out for more than 10 years now, like, I do meet people who are like, oh, this was my first tabletop role-playing game, and, thank you so much for designing it. And it's really nice, because it was like, yeah, I hoped that this would happen, and it did. So, it's...
Fantastic.
Yeah, it's nice.
Bucket list check mark.
Mm-hmm. I mean, there's always the theory, but then seeing something in action where you're like, all right, this worked out.
Heck yeah. All right. And I'm not going to bore you with those little lists that I made of my very holistic approach to age games and stealing from every single age book to make a wild Frankenstein campaign of mine. Yeah. Unless there's something else that you'd like to add.
I will add, yes, I will just add that if you want to do a campaign that's like, you can put anything in it, check out the threefold setting for Modern Age, because that was designed for like essentially all options of Modern Age to be part of it. So it's a big setting by design, and there's enough wackiness in there that you could start players on Thedas and then discover, this wider multiverse if you wanted to. So it's a good place to look for ideas.
Would highly recommend beginning your adventures in the Metacosm from Thedas. I'm sure the Chantry will approve.
That'd be very sad to find out about how much there is. Yeah.
Right. Has anyone seen the Maker out there?
He's just on vacation somewhere, probably.
Well, I think that's all I've got for you today, Mr. Pramas. Thank you so much for coming on to the Adventure Game Engine Interest Series.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All right. And
It was a good time.
yeah, it was. Hopefully, maybe we can have you on again sometime to talk about more like Age in general rather than just Dragon Age.
Yeah, sure.
Making no promises, of course.
Talk about my work. No, don't make me.
Right. Well, thank you for joining us, and thanks to everybody out there who is listening in, whether you're doing it live or whether you're doing it in podcast land in the future, at least compared to where I am right now. Thank you all so much for joining, and this is going to be Reyn wishing lots of 6s on that stunt die. You folks have a lovely time, and we'll see you around.
That's right.
Thank you for listening to the Adventure Game Engine Interest series. If you like what we do, please consider supporting us on our Patreon. If you support us at only $3 per month, you get to vote on our Patreon-only poll, which is worth twice as many votes as the other polls. Anything you can contribute is appreciated. You can find a link to our Patreon on our blog in the post for this show. If you'd like to keep up with the show, you can follow us on our Facebook or Twitter. Feel free to leave a comment or a question, or even tell us how your Age games are going. We do love to hear. Feel free to comment on our show on SoundCloud, and if you can, please leave us a review on iTunes or Google Podcasts. It really helps us out. The music and sound effects you heard on the show all came from Sirenscape, the legendary program for providing sound effects and music for your tabletop games. You can get started for free if you want to try it out first, and subscribing gives you wider access to the impressive and still growing library of sounds for fantasy, sci-fi, modern, superhero, horror, and other types of games. Take a listen to Sirenscape, my friends, because your epic games need epic sound. This is Reyn, wishing lots of 6s on that stunt die. Please take care, everyone, and we'll see you next time.